Hey everyone, just had a lovely catastrophic failure of my automatic water change system. Water leaking everywhere. So I'm doing these voiceovers after the fact. This first video here was taken like 60 seconds after I got downstairs and killed the water to the whole house. So you guys have seen this automatic water change system. I've done plenty of videos on it, how it's all set up. We were having dinner this evening, and my wife was over by the stove in our kitchen, which is right by the stairs that lead downstairs to the fish room. And she says to me that she thought she heard, did it just start raining? Did it just start, downpouring very heavily? And I knew it wasn't supposed to rain that day, so I knew it could only be one other thing. And I raced downstairs to find water just kind of splashing everywhere. I couldn't even really pinpoint in the moment, where the water was even coming from. It was just water splashing everywhere at a high velocity in this kind of work half of the basement. So I quickly ran over to shut off the ball valve that controls the water to the entire house. So I knew I could, stem the problem that way. So that stopped it. And then as I kind of got looking around at the mess, it soaked everything in a 10-foot square area on this side of maybe a little smaller, maybe a 6 to 8 foot square area on this side of the basement where the automatic water change system is, where the fish food's kept, where I keep a bunch of other stuff for storage. Everything's just drenched. And I got to looking around to try to figure out where it happened. And it happened at the backflow preventer valve, this clear one over here. You can see there's a couple of good, really big cracks in it, and it's still kind of dripping even though I shut off the water to the house. Just before that is my sprinkler valve that hooks up to the timer. And yeah, you can see a lot of the water just kind of concentrated in this area because that's where it had burst. So I'm pretty annoyed. I mean, I'm pretty sure that valve was rated for like 150 psi, and normal water house pressure, you're talking like 50 to 90, I want to say. So I don't see any reason why that valve should have had a complete failure like that. I'm going to go back in the videos that I've done on my water change system and see if I can remove the link to that valve and replace it with a better one, because I don't want to recommend anybody buy that one. But yeah, you can see everything here is just soaked. And you know what the crazy part is? Everything looks so wet. This was literally only burst for about 30 seconds. Like, my wife heard it right away, and I went right down and I killed the water, and it was probably only spraying for like 30 seconds. Now, the one thing that I will say worked flawlessly was the plan I had put in place regarding the timing of the water change system, because that backflow check valve comes after the sprinkler valve. So it's only pressurized on that valve, on that clear valve is only pressurized when the sprinkler valve opens up. So that's during the two 35-minute windows each day that the water change system's on, and I specifically designed my system with the idea in mind that I will only run the water change timer to open up the water valve at times where I'm most likely to be home, and that for me is 8 to 8:30ish in the morning and 5:30 to 6. And this was during the later time frame, the 5:30 to 6 time frame. But that worked perfectly because I knew we'd most likely be in the kitchen making dinner, and my wife was right there in the kitchen, right at the stove making dinner, and she heard it right away, and I was able to stop this 30 seconds in. Now, if my water change system was set to go off at night or during the workday when I'm not home, this would have been a disaster. As bad as this looks, it would have been flooding. I mean, I have a sump pump down there, don't get me wrong, but it would have been a disaster. Those of you who have seen my videos know that my fish rack is in my man cave, my finished basement. So I would have been heartbroken if there was any level of water damage to the basement. I mean, even with the sump pump running, this was a lot of water pressure. So I'm glad that plan I had at least worked. And if you're going to build an automatic water change system, have the water changes occur during hours that you're most likely going to be home. Because if you ever have a failure, you want to be home to hear it. So this video clip here, this is kind of me entering the recovery phase. I spent an hour hand drying everything on this side of the basement with a towel, drying it as best I could. And I have a fan running in here to help kind of dry things off. And I also have my dehumidifier running like on overdrive on the highest setting I can to try to lower the moisture level in the basement as best I can. And that little probe I just showed you there, that's actually a water alarm sensor. So I have this valve hooked up. This is my main line that comes into the house. And I have this this valve that I put on here when we first moved into the house. It's a water alarm sensor that will shut off water to the whole house in the event of a leak. I had this probe in a bad spot, though. I had it in the corner over there where the water comes into the house because I originally thought, that might be a high-risk area. I'll keep it over in that corner, and if there's ever, a pipe breaks or anything, it'll trigger it over there. But instead, I'm moving it to the top of the sump pit now because I figured that would probably be a better spot. I mean, it's right under all this custom work I did for the aquarium stuff anyway. So now in the future, if any of that stuff leaks, it will hopefully drip down right onto the sump pit and trigger that probe, which does an audible alarm, and it also closes that valve. So it would automatically shut off the water to the whole house in the event that it detects water on the probe. I can't recommend those enough to anybody who wants to flood-proof their basement. If you have a man cave, a finished basement, put in a sump pit and put in one of those probes too. Realistically, I might even decide to drop the probe into the sump pit because that almost seems like a logical thing to do too, but I haven't decided yet. That just think of the idea that if any of your pipes burst, the second that probe detects it, it will shut off the water to your whole house and stop supplying that pipe with water. So it's kind of a great thing to have if you're going to run a fish room like this and have a lot of custom plumbing work. I just had the probe in the wrong spot, but if I had put the probe in this spot right here where you see it, it might have shut off the water for me before I even got downstairs. Alright, so this is maybe a week later. I was waiting for the replacement parts to come in that I needed. I have all the parts I need now, and I'm now ready to replace this stupid check valve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut here and leave this end of exposed PVC pipe. I'm going to cut right about here. And then up here, I have two of these. I'm going to cut right there. I have two of these PSI regulator valves. I'm going to remove one because it's redundant. I ended up putting on one and then wanted to lower it even more. So there's a 25 that comes right after the check valve, and then a 15. I'm just going to use the 15 and remove the 25 altogether. Because I figure, in all the time I've worked with PVC, I've never had a PVC connection leak at any of the, straight runs of PVC pipe or PVC elbows or PVC couplings. All the leaks always occur in your valves, your check valves, your irrigation valves, your PSI regulators. That's where your leaks typically occur. That's your weakest point. So I don't want to have that extra redundant PSI regulator in there, pressure regulator, because that's just another more likely point of failure. So I'm going to pull out the 25. So it's going to go sprinkler valve to the and I'm actually going to switch up the order too. So right after that sprinkler valve, I'm going to put the 15 PSI regulator, and then I'm going to put the check valve, the replacement check valve, and then it's just going to run straight to the fish tanks. And that way the check valve will be working on a lower pressure too, so that'll reduce the risk of another high pressure failure. Alright, so this video right here is kind of the finished product. It took me maybe an hour and a half of just doing a little bit of work down here, but I got it all done. So what you see here is I have the 15 PSI pressure regulator now first before that check valve, and I actually just reused the same 15 PSI pressure regulator. Now, one thing I didn't think to do the first time around when I made all this whole system is to use PVC union connections where the valves are to make them easily replaceable. Instead, I just PVC glued them right in. So you can see this 15 PSI regulator kind of bumps out like this because at some point I had cut into an existing line and I had to add it in this way. So that's why it kind of takes a turn on upwards. But I did put those union connections on each end of it so I could easily unscrew this whole section where the 15 PSI valve is if I ever needed to pull it out and replace it. And if I ever did replace it, then I would just be replaced with a straight run instead of kind of going up and then back down. And then we make our way over to that new check valve, and this is one that seemed a lot heavier duty to me. I avoided the clear type of plastic material this time. And you can see this one has those union connections on each end too, so you can unscrew this easily if you ever had to perform maintenance on it or replace it entirely. So that's that. And then after that, it's pretty much just PVC, straight pipe, elbows, and a couple of couplings all the way to the adapters that kind of reduce it down to the drip irrigation line that goes out to the aquariums. So yeah, this is the finished product here. Replaced that crappy check valve, and I reduced it to one pressure regulator instead of two. I'm praying that I have no more issues with this. I mean, knock on wood, the system's been pretty good over the last 3 years that I've been running it. The only issues I've had is, at one point when I first installed these pressure regulators, one of them had a slow drip and I had to replace it. And then at one point that irrigation valve got all like clogged or something, and it wasn't opening and closing. It wasn't leaking. It just wasn't, it would stay in the open position or stay in the closed position. So I had to replace that. But this was the only major leaking incident I've had in the 3 years. And I'm sure there's plumbing experts out there that look at this and are disgusted. I'm very far from a plumbing expert. Everything I do is kind of based on stuff that I've learned from other people on YouTube and kind of just a lot of DIY stuff, a lot of kind of wacky configurations, but it's worked. It's worked for me, and I try to get better and better at it. For example, these union fittings. If I could go back 3 years ago and tell myself use union fittings on any of those valves you think you might need to replace, I would do it in a heartbeat. So if you're going to build a DIY automatic water change system like mine, use those union fittings, because then you can take out the valves and replace them without having to cut into the PVC, add more couplings, add elbows, to this whole convoluted kind of stuff that you've seen on my system there. So yeah, I wanted to share all of this with you because obviously I've guided you guys through my whole build process, and I know many of you who have kind of modeled your builds off of mine. So I wanted to share, where my build failed, and I'm hoping that some of you can maybe get that valve replaced before it does fail on you too, because I'd hate to see anybody have a flooding incident like I did. And kind of one other last thing I want to mention is I might do a whole video separately on kind of the flood prevention systems I have in place, that little sensor thing that goes to that whole house water shutoff valve and the sump pump, and talk about all that stuff. But one thing I really wanted to talk about too is the whole aspect of a high pressure valve break situation like this, where water is spraying sideways at very, very high velocities. And why that is so annoying and troublesome for me is because I have these prevention systems in place, sensors on the ground, a sump pit on the ground, but if the water is shooting sideways in all directions, it soaks everything in your basement before it starts to puddle up enough to even trigger any of those systems you have in place. So one other thing I was thinking about doing is, like I said, I know the points of failure. If my system that I built there is going to fail, it's going to be where the irrigation valve is, where the check valve is, or where the pressure regulator is. So one thing I was thinking about doing too was building some type of little plastic cage that I would put over those valves with holes in the bottom of the cage, so that if any of them burst, they would be spraying into the cage and the water would just drop below the valve and onto the sensor and into the pit and not soak everything in the room. That's just one other little thing that I might work on building, a cage that I could easily open and close if I ever needed to get at the valve and look at it. But if it ever burst, I want the water just going down. I don't want it going all over the room, because if the water goes down, it's going to trigger my fail-safe systems a lot faster than if it's spraying 8 feet across the room and soaking everything and creating a mold situation and getting on my food and getting on all the little aquarium stickers that I had that I haven't even used yet and stuff like that. So that's one last thing that I might build, and you might see me do something like that in a future video. But anyways, I just wanted to share this with all of you. I hope it can help one of you in preventing an incident like this, and I hope all of you take all of this into account. If you're going to build an automatic water change system, make sure it only turns on when you think you'll be home, because you can help prevent a lot of disasters that way. So anyways, if you found this video helpful in any way, hit that like button. And if you're new to my channel and you want to see more great aquarium videos just like this, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching.